I'm Nathan Smith, a master's student in interaction design at the University of North Texas. My capstone is on Teams for Home and finding a mass niche. I believe that we can unlock consumer products by offering more functionality within the apps that people use in their day-to-day lives.
I believe that homing in on what matters means reaching customers where they're at. My hypothesis is that Teams for Home is pre-installed on approximately 1.4 billion Windows devices, and if we can make that more engaging and useful to those users, then I believe we can unlock a mass niche market via plugins. In 2016, Slack welcomed Microsoft to the chat app arena by taking out a full-page ad in the New York Times. Similarly, in 1981, Apple had taken out an ad welcoming IBM to compete against them in the personal computing space. Since then, Teams has grown exponentially, especially during the pandemic lockdown. Slack was eventually acquired by Salesforce in July of 2021. Teams now has over 320 million monthly active users. Teams for Home has a smaller subset of this, but it's still in the tens of millions of users. Overall, Teams for Home aims to be more simple and user-friendly than Teams for Work. It has larger icons, larger emojis, a more relaxed color scheme, and centers a lot of its activity around the concept of communities. Teams accounts for 91% of all Fortune 100 companies, 25% of the collaborative software market, and yet only 4% of their users are 18 to 24 years old. The translation is that Teams is not really perceived as a cool app. It's not the favorite pick amongst an emerging workforce, and startups tend to prefer Google Apps and Slack instead. If all the users of Teams were a country, it would be slightly smaller than the United States. However, Windows itself is almost as big as China. The delta between those two numbers represents the number of users who have Teams pre-installed on Windows, but for whatever reason have chosen not to use it. So how can we grow our install base into active and happy users? I'm part of an internal initiative called Customer Love, where we daily triage feedback from users. One thing we've heard is that they want more table stakes features. Some of these exist in Teams for Work and others are already offered by competitors. For example, Copilot AI, PowerPoint Live, the ability to test your audio and mic before a call, and things like that. Another thing we've heard is that we're missing plugin apps, whereas we do have this in Teams for Work. I interviewed a number of people who use various communication apps at their place of work, and I'll briefly go through those here. Aaron Alexander is an executive pastor, and at his church they use a mixture of Slack, Basecamp, and a few other apps to keep in touch across different campuses. Ashley Crutcher is a designer at InterVarsity, and she uses Teams primarily and has used Slack in the past. She enjoys being able to quickly search for files that have been shared amongst coworkers. Charles Hahn uses Teams at his job. I would say they use it, but they don't love it. He appreciates core functionality, but wished that it was a little bit faster and less clunky. Jonathan Davis primarily uses Discord for gaming and arranging online gaming sessions, and so they'll use that while they're chatting in-game. Wendell Morgado is a front-end architect. Previously they used Slack where he works, and now they've switched to Teams, so begrudgingly they've kind of made that transition, but he misses the simplicity of Slack and the ability to have plugins. Scott Grant is a foster parent, and he used Slack to manage communication between all the birth parents and the kids that needed to stay in touch. However, Slack recently getting rid of chat history and making it harder to manage has pushed him more towards Discord. Shayna Hodkin uses Slack at work and in her synagogue and says that mostly they're happy with it, they just wish that it wasn't a paid license per seat. And Tim Samoff uses a mixture of all three, Slack, Discord, and Teams, because he tries to prepare his students for whatever they might use once they enter the workforce. Overall, the feedback I got is that Teams is good enough. It's, second place for business tasks. It comes bundled with Microsoft Office, so it's one less line item to pay for. However, people generally agree that Slack is better for text messaging, and they prefer Zoom for video. Slack itself is seen as simpler. It has a more mature plugin ecosystem, but recently they've made some strategic missteps by deleting chat history for non-paying users, and they also opted people in to harvesting their data by AI. Discord is seen as fun and quirky. It's definitely popular with gamers. Voice chat is primarily used as opposed to video because the game will often be taking up the full screen. and it's considered a viable alternative to Slack after Slack made those aforementioned missteps. To further my research, I conducted a survey about meeting app sentiment. Basically, I asked people, do they like having online meetings? If so, do they enjoy the apps they use? Also, what was their level of tech savvy? Are they familiar with plugins, either in browsers or communication apps? And if a plugin did exist for their favorite communication app, how likely would they be to try it out? Based on that survey, 91% of respondents said they are familiar with app plugins. They've either used them in the browser or in a communication app. 82% said they have multiple online meetings per week, so they tend to spend a lot of time in those apps. And 74% said they would at least try a communication app plugin if it was supported in their app of choice. How might plugin authors make money? They could have a freemium version with base functionality and then upcharge for additional features or remove ads. They could charge one-time or a subscription fee per user, or they could bill an organization directly. For instance, picture a sports club with multiple teams of different age groups. That way parents wouldn't be paying per child, but instead the organization would pay for the plugin on their behalf. To gauge interest around creating consumer plugins for teams, I spoke to several indie developers. One of these developers was Casey Baggs. He lives in the DFW area and is currently in the process of making Neural, which he emphasizes is not a video game. However, it's a way to track tabletop gaming stats. Instead of using pen and paper, you would roll the dice and then enter that into Neural, which would then help calculate the stats of the overall gameplay. Having this for Teams for Home would allow gamers to have richer real-time interaction online and potentially play across greater distances. Another use case would be keeping coaches, players, friends, and family in the loop about sports activities, such as a soccer team and how things are going. It could be used for scheduling, chat, and generally just keeping in touch with what's going on across the organization. To that end, I built a functional code demo which shows how a soccer club might use Teams for Home to manage their season. It includes chat, scheduling with RSVP, the ability to look at maps, and has some recruiting in there for kids that might want to play at that next level. Additionally, you could watch videos of past games. This could be helpful for players or coaches to see what went right or went wrong in previous games. There's also a file sharing area where you could have waivers or different forms that need to be filled out. You could also keep track of the team roster, like, what was that person's name? I need to match a name to a number. So overall, I think this would really be helpful for sports organizations across the board. I also made an example giving app that could be used to donate to nonprofits and charities. The thought here is that if the plugin exists in Teams for Home, you're more likely to see it and remember to check in on how things are going. You could also discover other nonprofits and donate in various ways. Additionally, you could see past giving over the past year or previous years. Sometimes life happens. Despite our best intentions, it can be difficult to keep up with what's going on in one's church congregation. To that end, I made a ministry app that could be used to watch the latest message, check the upcoming schedule, double-check service times before going to a campus, and in general just know what's going on with your church. Earlier in the semester, I did a soft launch of my Capstone demo. This allowed me to glean UX insights via Microsoft Clarity, which is an analytics package that tracks user movement, mouse clicks, heat maps, and things of that sort. That allowed me to streamline areas that seemed to be causing confusion and in general just helped the app to work a little bit better. If you're curious, check out my Capstone demo at capstone.sunspring.com. It should work on your mobile or desktop browser. I would be happy to hear your thoughts. Let's connect on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going. Thanks!